Welcome back to another episode of the Grassroots Tennis Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and grow the game of tennis at all levels. My friends call me Ship, but this show isn't about me. We will be bringing you interviews with coaches, community leaders, and players, along with updates about tennis happening around the world. Tennis is a culture, and we are all writing tennis history together. Today, I am here with Coach Andy Brandi, who, for those of you that maybe follow college tennis or just tennis in general, this is a name that you may already be familiar with. And if you're not, a simple Google search would show you a resume that if I started to read it, it may take me 5-10 minutes to list all of the accomplishments. So instead of spending all our time doing that, Coach, I just want to say welcome to the pod.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
I am so glad, that we were able to get you on. I really want this to be an opportunity for people to give back to the next generation, to be the sharing of knowledge and really just, a chance to talk tennis. I want to have conversations that don't expire. I want to start with you specifically. Obviously, you're someone that's been coaching for a long time. And so I've got to know, what do you think a good practice session looks like?
Well, what you do in practice is mostly determined on how captive your audience is, how engaged there is, and honestly, how how much intensity there is in the practice. I've always been somebody who believes that in practice you make your students uncomfortable, and you basically put them in circumstances that they're going to be in when they're in an actual match. So I believe in making the practices intense, demanding, and the best way that I can put it is, when I have them on the court, I ask them a simple question: are we doing a drill or are we playing a point? And so I want them to be in a situation where they believe, no matter what we're doing, that they're actually playing a point. So the mentality of doing the drill is such that it will be comparable to that of playing a match.
I love that answer. Obviously trying to simulate that match pressure or that match intensity is super important. What do you feel like, for a junior tennis player listening to this? What do you feel like junior tennis players, especially top level junior tennis players, what should they really be focused on? What's the most important thing for them to be focused on?
Well, there's different levels. When you are a youngster that is 13, 12 and under, what you're working on is your fundamentals. The key at that age is to basically create a very, very, very solid base. Once you get past that point, say 13 to 16, you're going to develop your game. You're going to develop your game style. Although while you're developing that base, you do it in such a way that you're keeping in mind what game style they're going to have. Once they get to 16, it's about competing and, becoming a good competitor and continuing to develop that game style, so that when I speak to my students, I tell them, I don't care what you do at 12. I don't care what you do at 14. I'm concerned about what you're going to look like when you're 18 years old.
I say that same thing all the time. Just that last part of what I'm worried about is, what type of player are you going to be at 18? That comes out of my mouth all the time. And we need to say that louder for the people in the back. Sometimes people get so caught up in those results when players are young. But at the end of the day, if you're building a complete player, it's about building for when they're, physically mature and older, and that you've got a vision for their their long-term goals. Oh man, I could ask you so many questions. Obviously, you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great players, and you've been at the college level as well. You've worked in academies. You've had such, kind of a cool coaching background. I guess where I'll probably want to go to next is, let's say a player comes to you, and by all definitions, everyone's definitions is different, but I'll kind of break it down for you. But they're a good player. Like, by good, I mean they come to you and there's not something glaring about their footwork that you're like, oh, that really needs fixed. Their forehand and backhand are presentable, the serve, the volleys. When you look at them, you're like, okay, that they have a solid base. And that player is looking to go from good to great, or even great to excellent, or excellent to elite. Do you have, a favorite drill that you just know, hey, if you do this, you're going to get better, or something that you implement if someone came to you looking to really move the needle and improve, you know, what piece of advice would you maybe give them, or what would you implement immediately that you feel like would give them the results they're looking for?
That's easy. The first thing I do is watch them play points. I would put them playing points. I would get a feel for how they compete. I would get a feel for what they do well playing those points. I would evaluate, uh, their defense, their offense, uh, transition. So I would look at components of their game while they're playing that, in my mind, I need to make improvements for them to go up a notch. I think a lot of times people say, well, okay, we're going to watch them drill and then you can see what you need to do. I don't believe in that, because there's no pressure in drilling. And so you're not really seeing them compete and be under pressure and see what things hold up under pressure, see what things don't hold up under pressure, and what I need to do to solidify their game, number one, and two, how I can help them mentally become better competitors. Because again, these kids do, in my opinion, they do too much drilling. They don't play enough sets. And I think that's, the kids become great drillers, but they don't become good competitors. I'm a believer that a top level player needs to play a minimum of 8 to 10 sets a week. And so that way they can work on stuff and not necessarily play with better players. The formula should be 25% they play with lesser players, 50% with players of their own level, and 25% with players who are better. And so for me to evaluate a player, I want to see them play. And then I can see a vision of the things that I see that I need to adjust and improve for them to become better.
I love so many things about your answer, and I could just, if you could give a whole sermon on that, and I'd be in the back row screaming, "Preach it louder, preach, amen." That's good stuff. I think that's something that coaches need to hear, and then also that just players need to hear, and something that I will tag on top of that. I think sometimes young people, like you're saying, they don't compete enough. I know sometimes they're like, well, I play with the same person all the time, and we're tired of playing each other, or whatever it might be. Don't be afraid to beat your friend. Don't be afraid to get out there and really compete with people. That's how you get better. uh, and so you've got to, like you said, you got to get those sets in however it is. And if you're not getting them in, that may be something you need to seek out whether if you have to travel a little farther to find those practice matches or those practice sets, depending on where you're living and how easily accessible that is, you've got to be playing with people. So I loved every part of that answer.
You,
For
sorry to interrupt. I think one thing that's not happening in clubs,
Mhm.
uh, like I grew up in a tennis club that had 4 tennis courts, and there were a lot of us youngsters. But one thing that was in common was that we all played with the members of the club, older, younger, whatever they were. We all played with, club members to have the opportunity not only to play, but to play with people who were awkward to play. So
Yes.
I think that's something that doesn't exist here in the United States. There's a separation between the adult members and the junior members. And I would like to see more uh, situations where you get them together on a Saturday morning and you have some kind of round robin on a regular basis, because that will give the kids to play with better players and the kids to play with worse players. And so I think that's something that overseas, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
In the country, there is no commonality of that happening at clubs.
I Yes, I totally agree. Anytime that juniors can play with adults, they should. I'm a big pusher to my own junior players of if there's an adult open of any kind, or if there's league play or the opportunity. I think young people don't play enough doubles either. So
Correct.
if they can get out and play doubles with people at their city park or at their club, whatever it might be, and they're getting the opportunity to mix and match partners, play with different people. Some
Yeah.
of them hit that funky slice or that weird shot, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I can't hit that. They're hitting the ball so weird." It's building this mental toughness, learning to hit against these people that hit a different ball. There's so many lessons you can learn from just playing with different people, and I think that juniors and adults. I was just talking to someone about that the other day. They've got to get the opportunity to play together, and I think, like you said, it's kind of a cultural thing across the United States. It's just not happening enough. It's frustrating, almost just a little bit. It's just a little frustrating. I think something I'd like to see happen that I've always thought was odd. So when junior players currently play in the United States, with the way the USTA is sanctioned and the way it works, the ranking points that you get in the 18s will go down for younger players and count for their 16s or their 14s or a percentage of them or whatever. But they've never offered essentially like amateur men's open, women's open tournaments that do exist for those, even a percentage of those points to go down and count. If you're a 12-year-old and you're playing a men's open, it doesn't have to be all of them, but if you win a match, those points should count towards your 12s ranking. That's, because it's not gonna, for an intermediate level player, whatever they might be, it's not going to majorly change rankings or whatever. Odds are it's going to be like a level 5 or a level 6, but incentivize adults playing with juniors. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, I've thought that for a long time. Okay, I'm gonna move on. With you being someone that has obviously coached a lot of college tennis as well, what's a piece of advice that you would give to young people who want to do the college tennis, that are looking to play college tennis from a recruiting standpoint or just even a development standpoint? What is a piece of advice you would have for people trying to play at the college level?
Well, the first advice I would say is to take your 5 visits, because I think you need to be aware of what's out there. Number one. Number two, when you go visit a university, you have to evaluate a lot of things. How do you get along? How do you picture yourself getting along with the players, and how comfortable you feel with those players? At the same time, how comfortable do you feel with the coach, and how much confidence you have in the coach that your tennis is going to continue to develop when you go there. I think many times we have in college tennis very good college recruiters who end up being more tennis managers than tennis coaches. And so that's something that you have to evaluate as a young person. You know, do you like the town? Do you like the campus? Do you like the dorms? Do you like the schedule that they have during the year? Watch them practice. Do you like the way the practice is? Do you feel the practices are too hard? Whether they're too easy? So there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration before you make the decision of where you're going to go. But I definitely would take 5 visits. I think now you have another factor, which is the NIL. And in some cases, you know, unfortunately, the way it's going, it's almost like it's players to hire.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to guarantee you this much. I'm going to guarantee you that much. In some cases, it's not going to be applicable. But I think that, you know, more factors in that situation are going to create more competition for the coaches to bring the right players to campus. But I would start with the 5 visits. I would, you know, I got to think about, how do I like the academic counselor? How do I like my teammates? How do I like the coach? How do I like the schedule? How do we travel? Do we travel by bus? Do we sometimes take airplanes? I mean, there's a lot of factors that you have to consider before you make that decision. Having said that, it's your decision. You can't let people influence you in your decision, because if you do that and you go there, you might regret your decision. It's your decision. You have to listen to your heart. You have to listen to your gut. You have to listen to your feelings that this is the place for me.
I think that's great advice. That's really good. And to what you said about coaches, players talk to other players, and sometimes people being interested in college, maybe you know someone that already plays for that school. Have an honest discussion with them about, do you, like you said, some coaches are great recruiters, and they're kind of more, they manage talent, and then there's some that they're really great at the player development side.
Right.
And just because a coach hasn't wowed you with their sales pitch to come play for them, you should still maybe consider that place. You know, if you talk to the players on that team, they may have a coach where they say, yeah, they're not super outspoken, but I've gotten so much better, and here's how and here's why.
Yeah.
Finding that if you're really looking to get better, you maybe would be well suited to make sure that you're getting a coach that can help you develop and find your next level. Whether it's, and then some schools I feel like have a really good 1-2 punch of, maybe the head coach is great at development and the assistant coach is great at recruiting, or whatever it might be. But yeah, what you said about that, I you know, that really stuck out to me. Coach, one of my favorite things to do in a practice session, let's say, you know, whether it be in like a team setting or like a group setting, just to share one of my favorite things. I love to, like you said, play live ball, playing points. I want young people competing. I love to run, you know, multiple courts, playing up and down the ladder with different rules and stipulations and times. One of my favorite things to do is, whenever we're playing, is to do it, you know, just at a point by point basis, or where we're playing tiebreakers on multiple courts. And my favorite thing to throw in is, if you play the last ball out of the air, it's worth 2 points. whether they, yeah, it doesn't have to necessarily be a winner, but if you hit a volley and then they miss with an error or they touch it or whatever it might be, if your last ball was out of the air, swinging volley, volley overhead, it's worth 2 points. That's one of my favorite drills. And then in a private session, private lesson standpoint, I love what I feel like is a staple in what I do is like serve +1 pattern work and return +1 pattern work. And then obviously I was a serve and volley player in college, so I love to work on transitions. Do you have in a group or team setting a favorite game or drill that you like? And then in more of a private session, do you have a favorite game or drill that you really enjoy?
Um, Sometimes when I set up practices in a team situation, sometimes I make it specific to some players. In some cases, I make the practice general. When I make the practice general, most of the time it'll be uh, things like serve +4 shots,
Yeah.
second serve return +4 shots. Um, I have a great game where each person serves. You play to 21. You serve 5 points. I serve 5 points, and the game is such that we play the point. If I come to net and I hit a volley, a half volley, overhead, and I win the point, I get a point plus all your points.
Oh, I
But then,
like that.
but
Oh,
then,
wow.
then there's some stipulations. If you come in and I hit a clean passing shot, I get 5 points. If you come in and I hit an offensive lob for a winner, game is over. And so that keeps the game competitive because you could be down 20-0 and win the last point and you'll win the game.
Coach, that's the best game I've heard from someone in a while. I love that.
Well,
That's awesome.
I developed that because of a young lady that I wanted to be more of an all court player by the
Mhm.
name of Lisa Raymond. When she came to Florida, my envision was for her to be an all court player. So I kind of invented this game for her to be in a situation where she had to come in more. Um, so I love that drill.
I am a big Lisa Raymond fan. Personally, I was wondering if Lisa Raymond would come up at all. I know that you had the opportunity to coach her. I used to tweet at her all the time. I got the opportunity to meet her at the Cincinnati Open
Right.
around 2010, and I really liked the way that she plays tennis. And obviously, she had a great career. She's shown that she can do a little bit of everything. She has all the skills, and probably someone, from an American tennis standpoint, that doesn't get enough shine for just how successful that she was. I mean, to me, what she did at the college level, what she did at the pro level, someone who's trying to play, tennis in their life, you couldn't. There's not a lot more that you could ask for as far as like, she really did a lot. So I love that that's where that drill came from, because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm stealing that. And then you said Lisa Raymond, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely stealing that. That's probably what we'll call it, is the Lisa Raymond drill. Like that's
No,
fantastic.
and with her again, I would take her literally every day and I would just do volleys for 15, 20 minutes to
Mhm.
get her comfortable at the net. So, I incorporated a lot of things for her to feel comfortable coming and being more of an all court player and developing the points that way, serving and volleying, chip and charging, that kind of thing. So that was fun time to coach her. I mean, she was, uh, and when I say fun time, I worked with her literally on and off until about 2006, on and off. So, we stay in touch, and she's somebody that's very special to me, and uh, I enjoy her, tremendously.
I love that. Well, it's so underrated. The people we coach, they become family. They really do. It's
Yeah,
a coach is a part of the family, and those players are a part of our family. Coaches that actually care and are invested. Uh, you spend so much time kind of pouring into that person. It's like they take a part of you, and you
oh
become
yeah,
so attached. It's a beautiful relationship that you can have, and obviously you have a very special one with Lisa, and I think that's super cool. And like I said, I'm a huge fan. She's was obviously very successful, and you got to be a big part of that, which is really cool. And I'm sure you're very proud of how she
fully.
did. Yes.
No, and again, I've been very fortunate. Like Kathy Rinaldi, I worked with her, started to work with her when she was 14 years old, and basically to this day, we either text or speak a couple of times a week. She calls me for advice on Fed Cup and other things. And Kathy is like my daughter, and so, this it goes way, way back.
Yeah.
Start traveling with a 14-year-old girl. And I've had that, I've been very blessed that I've had a lot of situations like that where, I've become, they become part of my family.
So you've obviously had the opportunity to work in an academy setting. You've had the opportunity to work as a college coach. You've had the opportunity to be a personal coach. What's your favorite setting? I gotta know. What to you? What is Obviously you enjoy all of them. Coaches love to coach, but what's your favorite?
I like to work one on one, but I'm going to say that some of the most fun uh, days in coaching that I've had was when I joined player development. And after the first year I was at player development, they gave me 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. And at the end of the year, they asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I want the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. They, knowing my background in traveling with professionals and working with top 10 players. And what I said to them is, what I'm doing with these 16, 17, and 18-year-olds is what I would do with the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. And so I became, in player development, I was in charge of all the kids 14 and under in the country. And so I had I would work with Tommy Paul every day for 2 hours. And, year by year, different people, as they aged out, I would get more, different groups. I traveled the country, and I would go work with the coaches and the players. I would go see Brandon Nakashima out in San Diego and work with Angel Lopez and him. So I had a tremendous amount of uh, fun doing that, because you saw them grow up and you saw them develop into, junior Grand Slam champions and, top 20 players in the world in professional tennis. So for me, I think that was the most fun. I obviously enjoyed college coaching. I like my years at Florida a lot more than the years at LSU. It's a different era. The girls that went to University of Florida went there because they wanted to be professionals. And 17 years, we developed 10, 100 professionals. Some of them became number one in the world in doubles. So I think those days at Florida were fun, because at the time I also was working with professionals. I had Jay Berger there, I had Pam Casal there, I had Kathy Rinaldi there. So it's a mixture of a lot of levels that kept it interesting, kept it fresh, and you never got bored. I mean, I was on the court 10 hours a day. So, but at that age, you have the ability to do that.
You've obviously had the opportunity to work with, a lot of great tennis, just developing them from a young age and so on and so forth. I actually recently had an interview, and after the interview, I told someone that I was going to get the opportunity to interview you, and they said, and I can cut this out if this is not a legitimate question, but from their take, they said I had to ask you what you could tell me about Welby Van Horn.
Oh, wow. You know, um, we were very fortunate that when we grew up with the Caribe Hilton, and I'm guessing it came from Steve Smith.
No,
Oh, okay.
no, it came
Okay.
from a young person.
Well, Welby Van Horn was way ahead of his time. He was a very technical coach, very technical. Our first lessons were in front of a mirror, and we learned footwork and balance before anything else. And so he stressed, you know, footwork and balance back then the way it's taught now.
Could you
So,
give people, not to date anything or to age anyone here, but could you let them know approximately how long ago that would have been?
well,
Or where?
I was 5 years old when I started. I'm 71 years old. You do the math.
Yeah,
But
it's been a while.
yeah, I always kept in touch with him. Um, he moved to Lantana, Florida at the end, and I would go see him and talk to him. And because he knew so much about the technical side of tennis that basically it applied then and it applies now.
Yeah.
People are saying, oh, that is not old time tennis. What is tennis today? Tennis is movement and power.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna be moving well, you better have good footwork. And
Yeah.
so I'll give you a funny story. I worked with Elena Dementieva about 2007, 2008. And so the first day I was on the court with her, she said, I'm having problems with my backhand. So I fed her some balls and I watched her hit backhands. And I said, this is easy. She looks at me and she said, what do you mean? I said, you're starting your movement with the wrong foot. You're not starting with your left foot. And so that's what's creating the problem. And within 5 minutes, things change. The other thing with her was her serve. She was having a lot of problems with her serve. It was her toss. So I showed her a drill that Welby used to do with us when I was 6, 7 years old. And, it explained to her and it showed her what you needed to do to have a good serve, a good toss on a serve. And she looked at me and she says, why hasn't anybody ever said this to me? And so basically, you know, he gave us such an understanding of technique and such an understanding of watching small details that were evident, that I'm going to say they're evident to me every time I go watch very high level players. And people say, well, how do you see that? I see that because of all the years that I spent with Welby Van Horn. And, again, we used to take a half-hour lesson a week. we spent a lot of time hitting on the backboard. We spent a lot of time playing with the members. And that's how we all developed. That club in Puerto Rico at one time had more U.S. national titles than any other two clubs combined in the country. I mean, he had an unbelievable knack of developing players And, he developed Charlie Passerell, who was number one in the country at one time. And Welby was he's I don't know if he's still the youngest finalist at the US Open or not. I mean, he was a hell of a tennis player. So, but understanding the game through his eyes is something that has been incredibly helpful in my tennis career. So, I've been very lucky that I had Welby. I was very lucky that I had Harry Hopman, and I was very lucky that I had Nick Bollettieri. So I had three people, different areas, that helped me kind of put together the best of each one into how I do things today.
I would say those are some pretty impressive names, and I got more from that question than I could have ever expected. I loved every part of listening to that. I think I could listen to you talk about Welby or even a couple of those other coaches you just named for probably hours. And like I said, I could talk to a brick wall for an hour. I could probably talk to you for 10. But
like when I worked for the USTA, I was pretty well respected as a developmental coach because of how I helped those boys, work all those details out before they went on with their tennis careers. So, and I had a lot of fun.
No, it sounds like a lot of fun. One of my favorite books is The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, and in that book he talks about talent hotbeds, and then you're describing this club growing up and everyone that came out of this one club and the accolades that they have, and I'm listening to all that and I go, that is the definition of a talent hotbed. And if you could take what was ever, not that there was something in the water, but just the way that Welby was coaching or whoever else there was additionally coaching, there was something in the environment and the way that it was being delivered and just all of it to produce all of that. A lot of things have to go right. And obviously that lots of things were going right. And obviously that's a special time in tennis history.
Welby has a book. You should look it up and you should read it.
I'm going to get it 100%.
I have it from time to time. I still look at it. It's falling apart, but it's a great book. It explains, in detail, balance, footwork.
I love to read, so I'm definitely going to pick up that book. I'm going to find it and I'm going to read it. Absolutely. Coach, here at the Grassroots Tennis Podcast, we believe in giving people their flowers. Who is someone underappreciated in the tennis community?
I think there's a lot of people who are underappreciated. I mean, you look, people like you. You're in a small community, you're promoting the game of tennis. You have a passion for the game of tennis. But I think there's so many people that are not being recognized for their passion, for their dedication, and for how they're spreading the game of tennis at a grassroots level, because that's where everything starts. You look at, your French Open, and they show Goran Ivanisevic in Novak's box, but that's not who made Novak. And he knows that. He says, I had this lady coach when I was a little kid, and that's how I started. You look at Alcaraz. Alcaraz was put together very well by someone who's getting zero recognition. And so those are the people that are developing these kids that are 12, 13, 14 years old that go on to be, successful professionals, and none of them are ever mentioned. And, it's people like you.
I've had that conversation with people a lot of times. You'll see people Within you'll see a college player have a lot of success, and so then their college coach who obviously does deserve some credit and has obviously helped them improve, but a college player doesn't win the national title, and then they start talking about, oh well, who started you and coached you for the first 8 years of your life? Those early developmental coaches, and like you said, Novak's coach, or I would love to pick the brain of some of these all-time greats first coaches, and what did obviously they see in them, but then what did they do right? If you could ask them, well, what did you do right? Is there anything you would have done differently if you could go back? That's, I think, would be an interesting conversation to have.
Again, when I was with product development, my job was to identify talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go to, say, nationals or different events and watch at kids. And I can't tell you that there's one thing I looked at, but there was a certain instinct and a certain thing that I saw in them that it kind of told me that they were going to be good tennis players. I was always, when I would go see Brandon Nakashima, they would go, "Oh, you're wasting your time. He's too little." Blah, blah, blah. I would go, "Okay, that's okay." So what? He's ranked 50.
Yeah.
ATP Tour, or a Victor Lilov. Oh, what is he doing here? Gets to the finals of Junior Wimbledon. Bruno Kuzuhara. What is he doing here? Wins the Australian Open Juniors. So it's just that instinct that you see from seeing tennis over the years, that you kind of feel like there's something different there than there is. And then sometimes I got criticized for not taking kids that had a lot of success at the time, that I just didn't feel like they were going to make it later on. So
no, that's all great perspective, and obviously you've had the opportunity to watch a lot of tennis, and your eye, or that gut feeling that you have, you've really learned to trust it, and the names that you're naming says a lot about how trustworthy that's been. Kind of pivoting here, I always ask people this because there's always something that people are passionate about. If you love the game of tennis enough and you want to see it grow, or there's something that, if those of us that are really tennis addicts, and we live it, we breathe it, and it's a part of us, everybody's got a hot take, whether it be a pet peeve, something they want to see change, something that's not, maybe they think it should be done differently. Do you have any tennis hot takes?
I think one thing is, for me, is that kids are putting too much pressure on themselves in going and chasing points. I'm a believer in a process. I'm a believer in a developmental pathway. And I feel like, look, you go play. After you finish playing, you figure out what you did right, what needs to improve, and you go and work on it. You come back and you work that again. I think kids today are too caught up in, UTR, ranking points, rankings, when they're really meaningless. I mean, you take a guy like Taylor Fritz. Taylor Fritz at 15, 16 was not very good.
I've heard that. I didn't see it personally, but I've heard that.
When it's a fun, again, he came to the player development to work with Diego. Diego told me one day, take him and work on his slice and volley. And he was terrible. Terrible. So here's a kid that at 15, 16 is not very good, and now he's top 10 in the world. So I think for me, everybody's different. Everybody has different time when they're going to come to their best level. And, parents today want things instantly. That kid comes to work with you, and if in 2 months he's not, beating the world, oh, his ship is terrible. We're going to go somewhere else. And that's the thing. They don't stick with people that are going to help them and that believe in them and that they have a plan to make that person better, and it's just, it works differently. Look, there's times, I'm going to use Kathy as an example again. I was with Kathy for 2 years, 2.5 years, and I was offered an opportunity with something else. And about 2 years after that, they came back to me and said, would you consider working with her again? And I said, yeah, there's some certain things that I want to do differently, but I would like that. And, when I left her the first time, she was 35 in the rankings. By the time, we were almost done the second time, she was 7 in the world and semifinals at Wimbledon. So, I mean, I think it's a matter of trusting who you're with and respecting what they have in plan for you, and understanding that it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, and hang in there with them. But there's not that loyalty to that, I find.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Tennis has become this, it's the ultimate sport of what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
It's a microwave society. People want instant results. And the truth of the matter is, truly investing in someone and making a plan and executing a plan, it takes longer than that. And unfortunately, we see that with this generation, and
Yeah.
it's not great. I will say, if I'm playing the devil's advocate, when you do find that, when you do find the family that's willing to stick with you from the beginning of the development process to the end, when you find that, that young person or that person you're coaching, or on the other side of it, that relationship gets to build and you get to see it, it makes it's even more special now. It's more special than it maybe used to be, because it's sad, but it's a rarity. And so you've got to really appreciate those when you get them. Coach, this isn't a question that I normally ask people, but I've got to know, you've been coaching long enough. Do you have anything kind of in your coaching philosophy that when you were a young coach that you were convinced that this is how it had to be, or that you were like adamant, this is what makes the difference, or whatever, but maybe how over time your opinion has changed, or that your coaching philosophy has changed? Do you have anything like that? Does that,
Well, again, I was blessed to be around 3 very, very knowledgeable mentors.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I would devour books.
Mhm.
I would read, Tennis for the Future by Vic Braden, My Spin of the Ball by, I would just, I wanted as much information as I could put in my brain. And whenever I would travel, in those days, I was traveling with professionals,
Mhm.
I would go and watch practices. I would just sit there and watch people practice because I wanted to see how other people were doing things, what things appealed to me, what things I felt like uh, were not benefiting the player, and how I could uh, help somebody that had the same problem at some time. At the beginning, I was a pretty tough cookie. I was very demanding. I was very intense, and I pushed players pretty hard because I felt like that's how I was. I wanted them to succeed, and I wanted them to be who they could be. As time has gone on, I've become completely different in personality, and I think, again, I want to bring Kathy Rinaldi. She sees me now and she goes, "You didn't let me get away with that." Or, a few, while Riley Opelka was healthy, he would go, "Man, you've gotten so relaxed. What's going on with you?" You know? So as time goes on, you change and you change your approach. And I think you tend to be more understanding. You tend to listen more, and you kind of become a better analyzer of the situation. But, I don't think I would change, the pathway that I had, because most coaches start with junior players and then they go to the professionals. I started with professionals.
Yeah.
And from professionals, I went to college players. From college players, I went back to professionals. And then from professionals, I went to juniors. And so, by the time that pathway kind of worked itself out, I've been up and down, the ladder, to understand what worked and what didn't work at
Yeah.
each level. So and again, the years I was with player development, it was tremendous because, um, I could teach these kids things that pros were doing at a young age
Mhm.
that other kids couldn't do. I had one time, Brad Gilbert come on the court while he was there one day, and he says, "I bet you these kids can't do that." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "What do you want to bet?" So, I made him do what he wanted, and he goes, "Oh, okay, sorry, I'm leaving." It's just, you kind of have a mental library up here of what works and doesn't work, and what approach works and doesn't work, and everybody's different. I mean, some people want to get pushed, some people don't want to get pushed, some people you can be a little more intense with, some people you can't. And so you have to start understanding the person. And I think that as I went along, I started understanding that better and better. You
Yeah.
know, Elena Dementia was somebody who you would say, "Okay, Elena, let's try this." No, I said, "Okay, Elena, this is what I want. You try it for 10 minutes. And if you don't like it after 10 minutes, we'll never talk about it again." And I could get her to do what I wanted her to do. And then she would go, "Oh, that's pretty good." But that's the kind of thing that you have to start understanding how to manage each person and find the back door for them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that other than when you talk about understanding people, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, and I believe I'm going to misquote it slightly, but it's a John Wooden quote. It's that every person's life that comes to you as a coach is like a cup of crap and sprinkles, and some people come to you and their life's been nothing but sprinkles, and it's your job to mix a little crap in. But sometimes people come to you and their life's been nothing but crap, so it's your job to be the sprinkle on top.
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
and not everyone, we're people are so unique. People come to you, they all have different problems, they have different skills, different strengths, different gifts, and you really just can't treat everyone the same. Life, I always tell people, whenever if someone ever says, you're not treating the same, life isn't fair. The fair is where you go and ride rides. If being fair isn't treating everyone the same. Being fair is giving people what they need. And that is
Correct.
what you embrace as a coach. And you,
Yeah.
without saying those words, that's exactly what you were saying. And I loved hearing it in the way that you were articulating it. Coach, I want to be respectful of your time. I've only got 2 questions left. This one might be hard for you. Could you tell me what is your happiest tennis moment?
Well, I hate to say this, but I've had
Yeah.
a lot of happy tennis moments, because I've been very lucky to have coached a lot of, uh, very successful tennis players. I mean, watching Lisa win multiple Grand Slams in doubles, uh, you know, uh, watching Elena Dementieva get to number 2 in the world, uh, watching Tommy, Riley, Francis become, top 20 players in the world. I when I watch these guys on TV, I laugh. You know, uh, I was very fortunate that I worked with Jay Berger when he was young, and then I worked for Jay Berger at Player Development, and now I go to where he's the director of tennis and teach 3 days a week. So there's uh, many times when there's been joy because of success, uh, but I would say there's just not one single one that I can say this is it. I mean, I think again, I've had tremendous teams in college tennis. I've had tremendous players in college tennis that won individual uh, singles and doubles. Uh, I've had players that got into the semis of Wimbledon, quarters of the French. I've traveled with people like Jimmy Arias, Aaron Krickstein, and seen Jimmy get to the semis of the U.S. Open. Seen Aaron Krickstein get to the round of 16 of the U.S. Open at age 16. I mean, there's too many to be able to say this was it. But
I figured your answer would be somewhere along those lines, but I had to ask it anyway. It's still a great question, and that was a great answer. Coach, the last thing I'm going to ask you, uh, but before I do, I just, I'm thank you for coming on here and helping to give back, to the tennis community. I really appreciate your time today. My last question is, who do you think needs to come on the Grassroots Tennis Podcast? Who do you feel like is a tennis brain or just has a great story to share that needs the opportunity to share or give back to the tennis community? Keep in mind, whoever you say, you have to help us get that person on the podcast, because you're the person with the connections, not me. I am merely a passenger on a journey of information, helping to document as the tennis world gives back upon to itself. So who do
well,
you think that we need to have?
I'm going to give you one name that is from your area,
Okay.
and that is, the last name is Hazlett, Anna Hazlett.
I know who that is. Yeah.
You talk about grassroots and developing tennis in Evansville, Indiana, developing a daughter that played college tennis for me, who now is in Indianapolis at the academy with Brian Smith. Brian Smith is another person that would be very good because he understands developing kids and has had a lot of success with developing junior players. Brian and Stephanie, Anna's daughter, are getting married. So that's, uh, but I would say Anna for sure, because she's done so much for tennis. She's, like I said, she developed tennis in Evansville. The Smiths and Stephanie in Indianapolis. But I want to give you another name who came from a small town like you, uh, in Wisconsin, and his name is Tom Gullickson.
That would be, yeah. No, those are
Dear,
all great names.
dear friend, Tom Gullickson is, again, that's somebody that I speak to every week, and the stories that he has. I mean, he grew up in a small town in Wisconsin with his brother, where the courts were across the street from his house, and the parents would kick him out, so they told him to go learn how to play tennis. So, and that's where their beginning started. You know, there were guys that went to like Northern Illinois uh, University and played there, and you know, taught tennis before they went on the tour, and how successful were they?
Yeah. Coach, I just want to say thanks again for coming on today. You know, it's been fun. It's been a blessing. I could do a 10-part series of just, you know, picking your brain and listening to you talk tennis, and I'm sure you could talk tennis for hours, but
I'm here for you, and anytime you want to do this again, just let me know, and I've enjoyed it a lot. I've enjoyed talking to you a lot, and like I said, you're a special person because you're very passionate about the game of tennis, and there's not many people today that do it for that reason.
I really appreciate that. I I genuinely, you know, the people I coach, they're like family, and this game, it provides opportunities like nothing else in the world, and I think, you know, what people don't realize is once you're no longer afraid to hear the word no, what you find out is that if you ask how often you get the answer of yes, it opens so many doors. I've been very blessed with the amount of people that have already been willing to share and to come on. Um, but you know, networking is a big part of tennis, and it's such a small world. And like, it's been such a blessing. Sometime we will have to come back on. But what I think would be fun would be to have you and Diego on at the same time.
Sure.
I think that would be super fun too. We need to round table that. We could even, I don't know, it would be great. But Coach, thank you. Also, you know, for the people listening to this and that will eventually listen to this, I just know that they want to say thank you too. You know, documenting this will be out there, you know, forever, and someday some young person is going to come across this podcast, and they're going to listen to this episode, and I feel like they're going to learn a lot. For those of you listening to the Grassroots Tennis Podcast, if you love what we're doing, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify, and share this episode with somebody that you know loves tennis. Share this. That's how you know, this continues to grow. Pay it forward. And you can follow us on all forms of social media. We are doing follow for follow. If you follow us, we want to follow you, if you're a friend of the show. And then additionally, if you have any follow-up questions, or maybe you know someone that should be on the podcast, you can reach us at grassrootstennispod@gmail.com. Coach, thank you. Enjoy
Pleasure,
the rest of your night.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it very much. I look forward to the next time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.